Hello everyone. Little change of scenery here. Aaron is not going to be joining me for the February wrap-up that I'm doing right now because he talked about everything that he read in our reading challenge video, which will be coming soonish, hopefully, when we finish that reading challenge. So I'm going to be talking about the things that I read this month. Now, I'm a little out of breath from running down the stairs. Now, a lot of these books I have been reading to my children as part of our homeschool. We do a very literature-based, very heavy literature-based homeschool. So a lot of these novels are for that because I am reading to them hours a day. So a lot of reading is happening. But a lot of these also are for myself. So let's just get started. The first thing I read in February was Darkness Dawns by Diane Duvall. And this is part of the reading challenge that Aaron and I have a separate video coming for, so I will be brief. But this is the first book in a series called The Immortal Guardians by Diane Duvall. And this is Aaron's favorite romance series. And I am reading it for the first time. And for all my thoughts on each individual book, look forward to that video. Okay, the next novel, I read several smaller things that Goodreads considers them to be worthy of, charting, I guess, but they're not actual novels, so I'm going to skip those. So the next novel that I read was Anuka's Answer by Marjorie Cowley, illustrated by Bryn Bernard. And this is a book about a girl named Anuka, and her family lives, let me make sure I'm actually 100% correct here. So Anuka's family lives 12,000 years ago in England. No, well, in this sort of area that England would be, in Western Europe. And they are just starting to settle down, and they have settled near this river where salmon migrate. And they make their living they're able to stay in one place because of all of the salmon that they catch and preserve and then eat throughout the winter. This is going great. Anyways, this is a story about a 14-year-old girl named Anuka who is a free spirit and doesn't want to follow tradition, clan tradition. Her father wants her married off. She wants to be an artist. She wants to make these clay figures that she's been doing, and she wants to be independent, and she is told she can't do that because she's a girl, and she's expected to be a proper clanswoman and cook and clean and have babies and that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was well done. I think that the back, the author's note, she talks about the inspiration and a little bit of the historical significance of the area, and how actually some research indicates that it wasn't farming but actually fishing that originally helped early people settle in one place longer. Anyways, long rambly wrap up. Okay, the next novel I read was Night Reigns, Book 2 in The Immortal Guardians by Diane Duvall. And I will talk about it more in my wrap up. of the reading challenge. The next book that I read was Mandy by Julie Andrews Edwards. And this, oh my God. Okay, so this is nostalgic for me. I remember my mother reading this to me when I was my kid's age, and so now reading it to them was really great. This is about a little girl named Mandy. She's about 10. She's a 10-year-old. She lives in an orphanage and she gets very sad sometimes. She's very lonely. And during her quiet walks through the woods, one day she discovers this little cottage that's abandoned and kind of run down. And she starts imagining that she lives there, and she starts taking care of it and planting flowers, and she's having a lot of fun just with the domestic chores of dusting and sweeping and weeding, and she really likes it, but she really doesn't want anyone else to find out about her little secret cottage. And so there's a lot of lying and sneaking around, and eventually she does get caught. And I just thought it was a very wholesome, very sweet, very cute book. So my girls really enjoyed that one as well. The next book I read was Phantom Shadows, book 3 in the Immortal Guardians. And then I read The Kin, which is Poe's story by Peter Dickinson's. And I didn't realize this was book 4 when I picked it up, but it actually, it read just fine. There was no problem understanding. So this is a story about ancient people 200,000 years ago in, I'm assuming, Africa, because there's a lot of desert and food and water are scarce, and they're traveling, they're very nomadic, trying to just survive, basically. And this is a group of random groups of people have run into natural disasters or famine or certain situations, and only a few have survived, and then they've all kind of collected. So there are several different tribes, basically, of people that only have a few remaining living members, and they're all working together and traveling together, and they've kind of created this new group, but they still are holding to those old ways of thinking, keeping themselves separate. And I did not love this story because it was very difficult to read. The language is very choppy. The dialogue, I'm trying to find an example. So here's an example of the dialogue. They smear salt on their foreheads. This is good. It is happy time stuff. So I, Chogi, say they do not wait. They do this now. I, Chogi, say this. It's just, like, I see what the author's going for, but it's difficult to read aloud. And then every other chapter is an ongoing, like, myth throughout the book. And I thought that was a pretty good idea, to like break up the story and kind of lend a more whimsical tone to it. The girls really liked that one. This last month we started the series of Unfortunate Events, and we read book 1, The Bad Beginning, and book 2, The Reptile Room by Lemony Snicket. And I've only read the first 3 or 4 in this series, but I enjoyed it. And I am loving them so much more, reading them out loud to my children. and having them get so invested in the story and trying to solve mysteries and looking for clues. And the way they're written, they have a lot of large vocabulary, and they define a lot of the large vocabulary just as a natural process of going through the story. And I really enjoyed that. These just lend themselves so well to our literature homeschool. And so for the bad beginning, we actually made puttanesca sauce, puttanesca pasta, which the Baudelaire orphans make in this one. And for the reptile room, we went to the zoo and we went to the herpetarium, and we got to see a bunch of reptiles, and that was really great. These, I was a little concerned at first because they are dark books. They're about orphans being neglected and mistreated by horrible guardians. But the way it's told is just so perfect for this age group of children that they just really get into it, and they get emotionally involved in a good way, where they're laughing at certain things that I was a little concerned about, but they're seeing it as a child and they're really enjoying that. So I'm really enjoying that too. Okay, the next thing that I read was The Bear and the Nightingale, book 1 in the Winter Night trilogy. This is by Catherine Arden. And this has been on my TBR for so long. So many people tell me that they love this book. And this is a Russian-inspired, how do I want to say, magical realism, fairy tale-esque story about a family who lives in northern Russia. It's very cold. It's a winter fantasy. And there is a clash between the new religion of Christianity and the old religion, where they worship these spirits, and there are different spirits, and there's the spirit in the kitchen fire that they leave bowls of milk out for, and who they believe helps finish mending socks that are left out. And there are spirits in the woods, and spirits in the stables, and spirits all over the place, right? I would have loved this book so much more had I not read Uprooted and Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. And I say that because Spinning Silver, I believe, drew on the same character from mythology of this winter king. This male deity figure where ice and snow and deep freeze follows in his footsteps, and he's a bringer of death to those that are unworthy, and he rewards those maidens that please him, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, I didn't really love this book. I ended up speeding up the audio just to finish it because I promised my best friend I would read this, but I really had a problem with it. It was well written. It was a fine story. It was not the story's fault. It was definitely me. And I just had a hard time separating the two books, Spinning Silver and The Bear and the Nightingale. They just merged so much in my mind that it was my fault. But I will not be continuing on in the series. I recommend it for people who like Russian-inspired fairy tale-esque stories. And what do they call it? Like polar fiction or winter fiction? I'm not sure. But it's a good book. It wasn't for me. And the last thing I read in February was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And this has been on my TBR for ages. I'm so happy I finally got to it. This is not what I expected it to be. I thought this was going to be horror or at least suspense. I was under the impression that this was a ghost story. And maybe it is, but it's definitely not horror. I would not classify this as. This is, the closest thing I can equate it to is The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. That atmospheric feeling of uncomfortableness. That is what this whole book is, I feel like. This is a story about a woman who marries a much older man, and they go to live in his estate. And everything is very, very, very proper. Everything has history to it. There is a right way of doing things. There are a bunch of staff members who have been doing the same thing for so long that she comes in and she doesn't know her place. Everyone else knows what's expected of her and what's expected of everyone else, but she doesn't know. And so she feels like a third wheel the entire transitional process. She doesn't feel like she can move anything or touch anything. And the whole time, she feels like she's being compared to her husband's late wife, who passed away maybe about a year before she married him. Her name was Rebecca. And everywhere she looks, everything she touches, everything reminds her of Rebecca and reminds her that she was not the first Mrs. De Winter, and that this character, this larger-than-life woman who she believes was the most beautiful, the most perfect, the most capable woman, she feels like she can never attain, never live up to the expectations that Rebecca set. And I'm really glad that I finally read this. I did not like the way it ended, but I think the rest of the book definitely made up for that. And I mean, how else were you going to end it? I'm not sure. I think it was definitely worth the read. Very glad that I finally got to this. And I am excited to get to Daphne du Maurier's second book, or just other book that I know of, which is my cousin, not Rebecca, Rachel? My cousin Rachel, or something like that. I'm looking forward to reading more from this author. And that is what I read in February. Please like, comment, subscribe, and look forward to more videos from us soon. Okay, bye.